Hello, everyone. I am here. I don't want to embarrass Peter with my favorite drummer in the whole world, Mr. Peter Erskine. Welcome, Peter.
You just embarrassed me, and I'm delighted to be on your list of favorites. I know you must have many, and I'm I'm not my favorite drummer, but you're my favorite publisher. So how's that?
Oh, thank you. And I'll qualify that because people ask me, who's my favorite drummer, and I'll say Peter Erskine, and invariably you'll say, well, what about Dennis Chambers? What about this guy, that guy? And I'm like, they're all phenomenal drummers, but I don't know of any drummer in the world who can do some really absolutely gorgeous esoteric work and then do Steely Dan Hey 19. I just don't know of another drummer who can do that, and that would be Peter Erskine.
Well, thank you. I think the Steely Dan gig managed to give me some bona fides, um, which were not appreciated at the time by the folks at ECM Records, where I was
I'm sure.
quite busy and active. Um, Doing very intimate kind of chamber like jazz, but I always looked forward to you know always broadening my playing experience because I felt that every style informed the next one, and I could learn something from doing a Honey Nut Cheerios commercial recording or doing a recording with an orchestra. Now it's interesting. I just got an email from the Los Angeles Philharmonic. Um, I was supposed to do the Bernstein symphonic dances from West Side Story this week, but this was the week that our daughter was supposed to give birth to our little granddaughter. So I said, well, I'd better cancel that. I guess I could have put it on hold, but I felt it better just to cancel it. And I've been on errand running and dog sitting duty. Um, all with great pleasure. But anyway, I got an email this morning asking about my availability for a series of Marvel um, uh, adventure, in concert, something. And Gustavo Dudamel will be conducting. Um, but I said, hey, if it's okay, can I at least take a peek at the music because how did I put it? I'm not confident that I would be the best choice. For anyone who knows me, that's polite speak for I'm really not sure I want to even bother doing this. But um, so
It's a business thing.
yeah,
I'm not sure. It's a great business. I'm just not sure it's a right fit.
yeah, exactly. So when I was younger, I I took pride and joy in trying to be as versatile as possible. And I'm 70 now, and I figure, well, it's okay to kind of dial in a little more closely and just do the things that I want to do. And I think that's why we're here today because we're going to
Absolutely.
talk about something that I very much wanted to do.
One of the things before we get into the new record, I love saying record again,
You know?
is of all, 20, you've done 20 solo projects under your name, but you've worked with everyone, I like to say, from Jaco to Joni. And, and so it does beg the question when I've listened to you on so many different types of genres and subgenres. Was there a experience that you had working with someone that was the most enjoyable? Is there any at the top of your list?
Well, what I enjoy doing the most is just playing acoustic music, jazz. Uh, it's at its best when we don't even have a PA system that we just play naturally, and that's the most fun for me. The most memorable playing experience was with Joni Mitchell, and we had taken this Both Sides Now album project that was a momentous bunch of music that Vince Mendoza arranged and conducted, and we were playing with different orchestras in different cities. And we were in New York City playing. I forget what they call the venue now, but it used to be the Felt Forum. It's the auditorium underneath the Madison Square Garden. Nice concert venue. And a big crowd and a lot of excitement. And Herbie Hancock, who had played on the recording session that we did in London, all live, he was a guest pianist at a few of the performances, New York included. So someone announced, it might have been Joni, ladies and gentlemen, Herbie Hancock. And Vince counts us off, and us meaning myself and the great bass player Chuck Berghofer, and we're just kind of doing this doom 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 doom, and we're vamping as Herbie walks across the stage. He does a wave to the crowd. As soon as he sits down at the piano, he played two chords, doom 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 bop beep bop. And Michael, I don't know how to describe it other than it was like a kung fu movie scene. I felt my right hand go, and it just locked into place time wise. Mm-hmm. And I'm kind of looking at my arm just in amazement. I went, holy cow! His sense of rhythmic feel and intention was so strong. And I've talked to some other musicians who've worked with Herbie, and they said, I know exactly what you're talking about. So I've only played with Herbie a few times, but I'll never forget that experience. It wow. It was just remarkable. So that's the most memorable.
Most memorable. And as you know, Herbie is a huge Joni fan, and I think the other way too. I think Joni's a huge Herbie fan, and yet, what's interesting is that when Herbie did that Joni record, you could hear sort of the magic that Herbie brings when he plays on certain tunes, and it wasn't only on Joni's album. I remember there was a Michelle Ndegeocello track. Mm-hmm. It was an Impulse recording. I think it was Red Hot and Blue. It was a various artists compilation, and it was of course a little bit on the hip hop side. And then you go, well, Herbie's on this track, and then the first time I listened to it, I was like, the timing. Only Herbie could do that, where the playing and the timing is so magical. And I use that as a reference sometimes. I think it's Nocturnal Sunrise, maybe the name of the track. Nocturnal Sunshine. Check it out. You'll love it. If that magical moment happened with you, listen to it on this track. I think that magic was happening as it does on so many Herbie tracks.
Check that out.
So there's Peter, Joni Mitchell, Jaco Pastorius, and Herbie all in one photo. I love it.
This was in 1978. And Jaco got me on the Mingus album. Joni had done some recording back in New York, and she and the producer, who was also the engineer, Henry Louis, wanted to give it a go with Jaco. And when they contacted Jaco, he said, well, I'll do it, but only if you call Peter. So they didn't know me from Adam. And I get a call from Joni's management, Elliot Roberts, and wow, okay. Mm-hmm. So I fly back to L.A. and the pianist in the studio was a gentleman named Jeremy Lubbock, and Jeremy was a wonderful arranger, and I think he had been helping Joni to somehow piece together the music. So we do Goodbye Pork Pie Hat. We run it down. There was a Fender Rhodes piano. And Jaco came over to me and kind of like, who is this guy? And I don't know. And he said, I'm going to call Herbie, see if he's in town. So Jaco goes out like to the hallway. I don't know. It might have gone to a payphone or something. And he calls up Herbie. Um, then he pulls Joni aside and says, listen, I invited Herbie to come play. So you have to tell this guy to get lost. And a little bit uncomfortable. Um, he leaves. Herbie shows up. The first order of business is Herbie replaced the piano. So, they wanted to keep the track of Joni singing with Jaco and myself and Jeremy, but they're going to erase Jeremy and replace him with Herbie. And I'll never forget, I mean, just how, Jaco with arms folded in the control room looking over like, right? Great idea. And we proceeded to do that whole album in 2 afternoons, that first day and then the following day.
Such a great record.
I think that's one of the first, if not the first time, one of the first extensive collaborations that the two of them had. But Herbie and Joni.
Yeah. Wow. So I'll bring you way back. You and I are both, you probably haven't been there in a while, from down the shore in New Jersey. Your birthplace. I don't know how long did you live in New Jersey?
Wow. You're from the Garden State.
I am from down the shore.
Oh, wow.
Specifically. A little town called Deal. It was next to Asbury Park.
Oh, goodness. I used to take lessons in Belmar.
I know Belmar well.
Which is very close to all of that. That was a bit of a drive. I was down in South Jersey, kind of inland a little bit between Atlantic City and Ocean City, a town called Linwood. Mm-hmm. You might know by exit 36 on the Garden State Parkway.
You have to ask which exit when it comes to New Jersey, right?
Exactly. So I lived there up until high school, basically, mm-hmm. and the local high school only had a marching band, and I was, I was distraught at that prospect, and then someone told us about a place called Interlochen Arts Academy in northern Michigan, and it was heaven on earth. It was an arts school, boarding school, high school. But with a wonderful symphony orchestra and a great jazz band led by a gentleman named Dave Sporney. And it was called the Studio Orchestra. And the goal that Dave had with that ensemble was for us to get as much experience playing as many different types of music that involved rhythm section and big band instrumentation. So it was really thanks to that experience at Interlochen, not only getting to play in the orchestra, but playing in this studio orchestra. Anyway, sorry for the long answer. I didn't completely cut my ties. I went back to Atlantic City and would work mm-hmm. there in the summers. And
the boardwalk?
Pretty close. I played. I was a house drummer at the Club Harlem for 2 summers. Mm-hmm. I played timpani in the Ice Capades at the convention hall for 1 summer, and somewhere I actually have a few photos of myself playing gigs on the boardwalk.
Wow.
Now the Steel Pier, this was an amusement park of sorts, but they also had a ballroom that was frequented by all the big touring bands at the time. So I would be taken by my parents to see the Stan Kenton Band. Mm-hmm. This is the half mile out over the water, this ballroom, and I would sit in with the band. So I met Stan when I was 7 years old at one of his stage band camps, and then when I was 18, I actually joined the band, and that's when I left New Jersey pretty much for good. I was on the road.
Wow. Well, I remember a story you told me a long time ago where your dad snuck you into some camp. You were like 3 years old, and they were like, "Who's this little kid?" And your dad was like, "Don't worry, we got this." Could you tell our listeners about this? This is a great story.
Well, it was actually my mother who was responsible,
Okay.
kind of in cahoots with my drum teacher. By the time I got to the camp, I had turned 7, but I was 6 years old, and they talked me up to the folks that were accepting applications to the camp, and someone didn't quite realize how young I was. And meanwhile, my parents drove me, halfway across the country. This is back in the days before the interstate highway system was completed, so it was a bit of a drive, but I liked it. I liked everything about it. I liked staying in these motels with these tiny swimming pools in the middle of a parking lot, and the little bars of soap. I thought, wow, this is cool. That would set the stage for what I wound up doing for a lot of years. Anyway, we showed up, and Stan realized a good opportunity, because they were like, well, he's too young, and well, they did travel a great distance. So my parents and I got a dorm room, and I played for Stan that evening, like a little private audition. And meanwhile, the local newspaper had been invited. So that picture created a lot of interest. That was a wild week for me. I not only got to meet all the musicians in the Kenton band and then the North Texas 1 O'Clock band. They were sort of the resident band at this camp. This was on the campus of Indiana University, so it was in Bloomington, Indiana. Other students at that camp that year included Keith Jarrett, Don Grolnick, David Sanborn, Randy Brecker, Lou Marini Jr. I mean, it was a wild
All his kids.
collection of young. They're all kids. They were like 14, 15, something like that, maybe 16 years old. This was really the only place you could find jazz in terms of a school setting, because not that many schools had jazz programs. Jazz was still a dirty word, and you couldn't even call it jazz. It was national. This was the National Stage Band Camp. So at Interlochen, it was the studio orchestra, because jazz scared people. Of course, things changed, but these educators were pioneers. Cannonball Adderley's band was there, so and Zavino remembered me. This funny-looking little kid that wore short pants. That's how he described me. Louis Hayes, who was a drummer with Cannonball, I got a couple of lessons from him. I got to know Donald Byrd. We remained friends for years. So it was just I look at that, Michael, like I look at my career, in that I was just super lucky. I was often in a right place at a right time, and at some point, I was at a right place at a right time with a camera. What amazed me about a lot of these bands was that nobody seemed that interested in documenting what was happening. And I got the trust of the guys in Weather Report, because initially it was like, no cameras allowed. They wanted to maintain this veil of kind of mystery about how the band operated in the studio in particular. But I just snapped away, and so I've that's what I'm doing now since I retired from USC. I'm still playing, but spending as much time as I can organizing all these photos.
Wow. Yeah, I've seen a couple. You sent some my way. I remember there was this one great photo of all the students in this camp. And I'm looking at there's Sanborn, there's Peter.
Oh yeah, I forgot. Yeah, Sanborn. I didn't take that photo, but you can see me in it.
Yeah, of course.
The short pants.
I didn't see the short pants in that one, but
oh yeah. was a bit of a rat pack. A pack rat, not rat pack. Sinatra was a rat pack. I was a pack rat. I liked collecting things and holding on to them. So a lot of shoeboxes later,
Yeah.
photos. I just sent and donated most of all the memorabilia I have to the jazz archives at William Patterson University.
Oh, great.
Michael Brecker's widow, Susan, was kind enough to introduce me to a gentleman named David Dempsey.
Mm-hmm.
And he pretty quickly convinced me that this would be the place for it's incredible stuff, postcards that Jaco sent to me while we were on tour together, and I'd come home from a tour and there would be all these postcards from him.
Wow.
And so I managed to hang on to most of that stuff. And so I just last week, I shipped all that stuff off.
Wow. So I was going to ask you, and maybe Weather Report's a good thing to think about. Of all the projects you have done, some of them seem very difficult. Do you remember one that was particularly difficult to do, challenging?
Well, when I first joined Weather Report, I was, in their words, I was fearless. And then I began thinking a little bit too much about what I was doing and trying to please Joe. Zawinul was pretty much the default leading energy or leader of the group, even though he and Wayne had started the group along with Miroslav Vitus. And I mention that because I think Miroslav is often incorrectly omitted from this history of how the band started. He was very much an important part of the formation of the group. But certainly the drum chair was a bit of a revolving door. And when things got hot in the kitchen, I was tempted to leave a few times, but the one thought I remember thinking was, these guys know more about this than I do. So, let me stick it out and see if I can come through the other side of this. And ultimately, I was able to learn a lot, and maintain relatively good life balance. I mean, it was hard because these were very, macho, chest thumping characters, and everything that carries in terms of ethics and personality. Good habits, bad habits. So for years, I was always the youngest guy in a group, like with the Kenton Band. I joined when I'm 18. I've got long hair. Am I the most qualified drummer to join the band? No. But I was there at the right time, and I was replacing an excellent drummer, a guy named Jerry McKenzie, who's still with us. He lives in Detroit. But Jerry, when he wasn't playing the drums, he was a cop. And he looked like a cop, I didn't look like a cop. I was a hippie. And Stan realized with, the amount of time that the band spent in schools that maybe a young drummer that looked like a hippie as opposed to some 40, 50-year-old guy that looked like a cop would be a more interesting choice. So at any rate, any particular thing with Weather Report? It was just the big hurdle for me was I finally got over it when Jaco walked over to me one day because he said, he was really getting tired of our sound checks becoming drum lessons. And exasperated, he looked at me and said, "Listen," he said, "stop thinking so much. Just concentrate." Which meant just pay attention, just listen. And I tell students that to this very day, if you listen, you'll know exactly what to do.
Yeah. Oh, that's so true. Well, let's get talking about the new record, because I got this email from an audio company, McIntosh. I'm a huge fan of McIntosh products. I've owned McIntosh products over the years. and I see the Peter Erskine Quartet. Wait a second. Peter released an album on McIntosh. How does that work? And so I got a copy of the album, which, by the way, came exquisitely packaged. I mean, you opened it up like an iPhone. You just open the layers, and it's just beautiful. And you pull it out, and there's this, real heavy stock. The box opening of this is just, it can be a video in its own. And then, of course, I put it on the platter, which I'm now very much back into vinyl. And it's classic Peter Erskine. I mean, the drumming's from obviously not only a great drummer, but a great listener, because you have three spectacular musicians in your quartet. Obviously listening to each other. Like I like to talk about quartets all the time. It requires a lot of listening. You got 4 players there. And it's this really magical new Peter Erskine release. And I actually pulled out one of your old releases on Contemporary. I can't remember the name of the album. It's a black and white photo of you on the cover.
Just called Peter Erskine.
That's why I can't remember the title. but I said, okay, what's the difference between that album and this album? And it's like, just age, that's all. I mean, there's still that youth, that magic, that spontaneity. How did this whole project come about?
Well, it's interesting you mentioned that first album on Contemporary, because Bob Mincer was on that, and he's on this new McIntosh. And I'm sorry to be showing off with my camera setup here, but I'll just do this little switch here. That's Bob and myself at Interlochen Arts Academy, way back when. I think it was 1969 or 1970. So Bob and I have known each other for over 50 years, and pianist Alan Pasqua and I, we met in 1971 at Indiana University, where I started going to college. And I ran into him at a jam session. It was one of the first things I did when I got to the school. I heard about this jam session. And, a couple months later, we were sharing a farmhouse, and we started a rock band. So fast forward many years, the incredible Jeff Levinson, who
I love Jeff.
Yeah, he's the dot connector and idea generator supreme, certainly in my life. It's just every time I hear from him, I'm like, ooh, what's cooking? And he somehow connected with the folks at McIntosh. And this was a collaboration between the team at McIntosh and Sterling Sound. Now, the coincidence was that one of the powers that be at Sterling Sound had actually taken a drum lesson from me. So when they contacted Jeff, hey, we'd like to do this project, and then he said, well, what about Peter Erskine? And then, and so the idea was to record to analog, and for Sterling Sound to be in charge of the mastering, and the albums are that 180 gram vinyl, and there are 2 discs in this. And I agree with you; it's unbelievably beautiful packaging. One of the discs is like a regular phono disc, but it's cut at 45 RPM. And the fidelity, the sound on that is kind of mind blowing. And I'm like you, I got a really nice turntable. I don't have McIntosh gear. Excuse me, I think I have to save up to get some of that. But I've got a terrific stereo setup, and the McIntosh folks gave it a thumbs up when they came to my home and presented the finished product to me. Now, we were talking about the Joni Mitchell Mingus album. We did this album at the same studio. Most of us here in town still think of it as A&M Studios, the studio that Herb Alpert built, which was on the old Charlie Chaplin movie studio lot. It kind of returned to its former roots when Jim Henson's Muppet Company took it over. So now it's Henson Studios, and we were in the large room also known as the We Are the World room. If and which is enjoying a comeback. I realize that
Studio
younger people may
is that
not.
Studio A?
Studio A, yeah.
Yeah.
And it's a great sounding room, and the room has so much history, and something happens when you are in a space that has that much history. Your steps are different. Your awareness is heightened. The fact that so much good music has resonated, it ages the wood, I believe, a certain way.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it's hocus pocus. I mean, same thing happens on some of the sound stages in Hollywood. I walk onto certain ones and I say, wow, there's just a thing that happens. Carnegie Hall, same thing.
Abbey Road.
Abbey Road, yeah. It's undeniable. It's just there's and part of it is just a reverence that
Mm-hmm.
most of us feel because we grew up. Our favorite records were made in these places.
Mm-hmm.
So you can't make a good sounding record without a great engineer, and we got the best. Rich Breen, who
The best.
I've worked with over the years. All of us have worked with Rich in various projects. And he's brilliant. And the team at Henson was great. And so that made the whole recording process more or less, transparent. So we didn't have to be thinking about, bothered about this or that. We could really just focus on the music because we're recording directly to stereo. So it's not quite like direct to disc where you have to do 3-4 tunes nonstop, but otherwise there's that same zero margin for error.
Pressure, a little bit of pressure.
Yeah. No, that's no pressure because we all know each other, we all love each other, both as people and musically, and we trust each other. So it's just like two people. Two friends, two lovers, or in this case it's four. But there's, we're not trying to impress anybody, and we pretty much know how to do this. We had some new tunes, and so it took a little looking at to get some of the notes right. But we all speak the same language, so there was no sense of. I think when you're maybe younger, less experienced, you worry like, oh my God, my first album, I was very self-conscious of, and I can hear that self-consciousness getting in the way of everything I'm playing. And when you get older, it's, someone says, hey, smile, recording is just a snapshot. And so I don't get nervous when someone takes my photo, and I don't get nervous recording, especially if I'm playing music that I like.
Yeah, the sound quality is exemplary, and I could see where an audio company like McIntosh would say, well, we want this kind of sound, this kind of production, this kind of musicianship to basically show how good sound can be. And the acoustic side of it, I think, makes that happen more than any other instrumentation could.
I think it shows off the there's air around the music. This isn't the Olympic fanfare. This isn't there's not an unnatural amount of low end. I mean, you're not going to blow away your friends like turning up the stereo. And but if people want to hear, get a sense like this is what this music sounds like, then they'll very much be blown away. And the mastering, Greg Calby, he's the best. So
yeah.
Jeff's good instincts and good ears and good vibes. You can substitute great for good, and or any of those. Uh, Really kept us on track and enabled us to not have to, uh, keep mental tabs of was that good or whatever. He said that was great. Um,
Nice.
there was one tune he wanted us to do another one, and we all dug our heels in and said no, because
We still
sometimes
love
you
you,
just
Jeff.
sometimes yeah, well, of course, sometimes
Yeah.
you just know, but. Uh, that's one of the many wonderful things about Jeff is that you can talk about stuff and when it comes to art, not everyone's going to always be on the same page,
Of
and
course.
we'll have slightly different ideas within the quartet. Uh, because we've played that game for so many years, um, we can almost just like tilt our head and we all know what to do. Um, and as a quartet, we hadn't worked together that much, but I've been on probably a dozen or more of Bob's albums, and he's been on a dozen or so of mine. Maybe not quite a dozen, but um, yeah,
And the
we've
trio albums are three members. I mean, your
yeah,
trio albums, it's a completely different vibe, but same great players.
but the same, yeah, and almost the same. What's nice about the quartet is it takes a little bit of the uh, uh, not pressure, but the workload off of Alan Pasqua, and it's also great fun to comp for a great soloist like Bob. Um,
Yeah.
but one of the since I brought that up, I mean, one of the brilliant things about Alan is he just knows when not to comp,
Yeah.
and so it'll just be a horn trio. And then maybe if it's a piano solo, he does this Lenny Tristano kind of just playing with the right hand, and you know uh, not looking at every opportunity like how can I fill this up with my music making.
Yeah.
Um, and when a musician is younger, that's a natural tendency. And this is not the only way to core a apple, as the saying goes.
Yeah.
Um, uh, this is one way, and because of the uh, my playing ethos or whatever, the we tend to play most of the music on the softer side, because I just like the way that the instruments sound, and I like the way the music speaks, and I like getting the audience to lean forward a little bit as opposed to pushing them back. There are enough things in life that are loud. What I mentioned about the low end, by the way, reminded me when I tour with an acoustic band. Um, every band has a contract and a rider, and the rider says
Sure.
this is what we want in our dressing room, equipment wise. This is what we need, and ours is maybe only 3-4 pages, but one page, entire page, uh, just has 3 words on it in very large letters: no subwoofer. And if we show up and we see the subs, we say, we'd like to see you disconnect them. And because you can't trust these guys, some of these
Yeah.
local sound, front of house engineers, well, shit, I brought all this stuff. I want to show it off. The low end, and I'm not interested in that. That's why I'm like,
Yeah.
do I want to play drums in a Marvel comic?
Well, but I just figured out after all these years what I love so much about your work. And it's summed up in one word. It's quiet, but you can hear everything. And I really, as I got older, now in my 60s, I like listening to quiet music where I can hear everything.
Well, thank you. I mean, I do too, and I like I like loud, and sometimes I wonder if all this quiet is just a way of my trying or attempting to atone for years of having inhabited the other end of the spectrum, um, which could be the case. It's funny. I was reading a thread that my friend and the great drummer Mike Clark. Um,
Yeah.
Most of you may know him from his work with Herbie Hancock, the Headhunters. He's also done some recordings, well, as a leader and also with Michael Wolff. But Mike likes to hit it, and he was like, I don't get all this quiet stuff. Man, you're gonna play this music, you got to hit it, you got to burn, you got to swing, and all the other guys are, yeah. And I thought, well, yeah, okay, I guess I can't be part of that club then.
So
I can hit it. I can hit it if I have to, but I just generally prefer not having to.
So my 15-year-old daughter, when she heard that I was interviewing you today, and she said, as a 15-year-old wouldn't expect her to know Peter Erskine. I'm sure a lot of 15-year-olds do, but she said, well, who is Peter Erskine? I said, he's my favorite drummer in the whole world, as I've said already. And she said, do you think he knows Ringo? And I said, he probably does. Is there any specific questions you'd like me to ask Peter? And she said, yeah, what does he think of Ringo? And the reason I even bring that up is that when you talk about complexities of drumming, I had a conversation, a podcast once with John Anderson from Yes. And we were talking about Bill Bruford, great drummer from the UK. And, he's best known for Yes and King Crimson, but he's also done some pretty interesting jazz records. Mm-hmm. And when I asked John Anderson what he thought about, were there any times where Bruford's, the complexity in his playing became difficult for the band? And John said, yes, there are some times where I just said, just do Ringo.
Well, if you watch the documentary, which I haven't made it all the way through, but the Peter Jackson film about the Beatles, and so I think it's during the whole Let It Be period, and they're in this film studio, and it's so they're trying to deal with the sound of this place that someone decided to use, and they're working on the songs. A couple things I noticed. One was the incredible attention that Ringo was paying to the entire creative process, sitting there. And when he played, number one, he was finding the perfect beat for the song to support the song. But his dynamic level, he's not hitting too hard. He's allowing this creative process, so it all has a very natural feel. So no one's having to fight. No one's having to raise their voice too much. And the thing about recording, as well, with the pandemic, we all started recording things separately, and years before that, they'll put this component, let's say the drum set, in an ISO booth, and then put that other thing, and they isolate everything. And when things are isolated, hey, I can do this, I can do that, and it's not getting into anyone else's microphone. When you play in a setting where your sound does get into other people's microphones, it forces you very quickly to edit your playing choices. And I was doing a recording with Seth MacFarlane, and we were in Capitol Studios, and the idea was to do a Sinatra-esque. They found the seating setup of some of the Nelson Riddle sessions, and we copied that. And soon, I'm seeing the figures, and I'm doing the typical kind of big band thing, playing drum fills before the horns come in. And the first playback, I was, ooh. Not just the drum mics hearing what I'm doing. It's the saxophone mics. It's the trumpet mics. It's the... okay. And and all of a sudden I flashed back to, this is why a drummer like Alvin Stoller or Jack Sperling or Irv Cotler, this is why they made the choices they made in the 50s. Because you're part of a bigger team. And so Ringo was an essential part of the Beatles team. And you can tell your daughter that I think Ringo is a genius. And his drumming really was, I can't imagine any other drummer being the drummer for the Beatles. Now, I will admit, when I was young and I was watching them on the Ed Sullivan Show, you know, I was listening and I thought, wow, that would be cool if they got Elvin Jones.
Right.
And I thought the same thing when, then I saw the Doors and and John Densmore was the perfect drummer for the Doors. But as a young kid, I'm thinking, yeah, Elvin, maybe they should get McCoy too.
No, I couldn't agree with you more. When I was younger, I really didn't appreciate Ringo. Mm-hmm. As I got older and listened to lots of different music, back then there was like 5 bands I listened to. I listened to the Beatles all the time. As I listened to thousands of albums since, I go, he was the perfect drummer for the Beatles. I couldn't agree more.
Yeah, and the sound is great. The beats are great. I marvel at the way he played the hi-hat and the way he would play on a floor tom with a towel on it and get that kind of a thing going, and just the that magic of the 4 of them. Yeah. The music still sounds fresh. It's kind of remarkable. I mean, how many years ago is that? 60 years ago. And when we were young, music that was 60 years old really sounded 60 years old, right?
Yeah, and we hated it. We didn't listen to it. It was like, it's my parents' music or my grandparents' music.
And I don't know if older people back then could listen and go, yeah, boy, that shit sounds fresh, man. Because, because the Beatles, and that was something about Weather Report to me, that I can listen to any iteration, any version of Weather Report, and it still sounds modern to me. And I can't say that for a lot of music that was produced in the early 70s. A lot of that music sounds like the way our sideburns and bell-bottom pants looked. They're kind of ridiculous now.
Well, just as Ringo was the perfect drummer for the Beatles, I really say this, and I love your playing so much. You've been the perfect drummer for so many projects. I was very excited when this McIntosh project came out, and what next? What are you working on now?
Well, I'm glad you asked. This was something we did a few months after the McIntosh session. That was done in September of 2023. In January of 2024, I found myself in Vienna, Austria, and I had suggested a project. And again, this is all thanks to Jeff Levinson connecting me with a guy named Marcus Rotka, who is the founder of the Jam Institute, Music Institute, and for lack of a better description, it's the Berklee School of Music in Austria. Incredibly ambitious program. They've got great teachers. And so I had suggested, after we had done an earlier project celebrating the music of Joe Zawinul and Friedrich Gulde, who was Zawinul's mentor way back in the day in Vienna. I said, why don't we celebrate the music of 2 Viennese composers who went to Hollywood? And that would be Max Steiner and Eric Wolfgang Korngold. And we were having beer and schnitzel, and I wasn't sure that the idea would get much traction. But lo and behold, everyone got. I did a pretty good job selling it, and so here we are with primarily faculty from the Jam School, including an incredible pianist who hails from Los Angeles, Danny Grissett. And Danny and I shared arranging duties. Um, and I'm the guy that had a big corngold uh, habit. Um, and anyone who likes corngold, they tend to have a corngold habit. They're diehard fans. And so the guiding principle for this project, Michael, was how to arrange this music so it won't piss off any corngold fans. Because they cherish this stuff, and a jazz setting is, it's to quote the Spinal Tap, it's a fine line between clever and stupid, and we love the music, and the musicians they were so good, both the faculty and the students, and we spent a week recording this stuff in Vienna, and then I brought the files back with me and did some mixing here. And I overdubbed a couple of LA's finest to put that Hollywood sheen. And so Vienna Goes to Hollywood, that'll be coming out around the end of the year. Meanwhile, we did do an earlier recording called Bernstein in Vienna. And we're hoping that maybe that'll make some sort of dent or impression during the Grammy season. That it'll be that time of year pretty soon. But that involved a number of the same people, including this great pianist and arranger Danny Grissett. And so the label located up in the Northwest, Origin, they're releasing. They released the Bernstein, and they're going to release the Korngold. But I think the McIntosh is maybe my best pure jazz recording. The Korngold thing is something very special, and it touches on Steps Ahead. It touches on some of the work I did with Ileana Elias. I mean, there's bits of George Shearing in there.
Wow.
A little bit of Kenton. Something for everyone. And not to be morbid, but if something horribly drastic and bad were to happen to me, in addition to being grateful for everything in life, I think I would go. And you know what? That's a good record. I'm okay.
Well, we certainly hope nothing bad happens to you.
Oh, thank you.
You're a wonderful, wonderful person, great drummer, and we very much appreciate you, and I appreciate you taking the time today. It's always good to catch up with you, Peter.
You too, Michael. I hope we can do it in person the next time.
Yes. And
so that means I have to come to Florida, I guess, right?
It's where I spend most of my time these days. So there's a wrap. The great Peter Erskine, new album on McIntosh, the Peter Erskine Quartet. Check it out. It's $150 and it's worth it.